24 minutes before 9 o'clock. Thank you for tuning in this Monday morning. Hope you're doing well. It is time now for News Bites. This is the segment we created so we could squeeze in as much news as possible. This is the reason you tuned in to News Talk in the first place. It was for the news.
Yeah.
And we do have a lot of it right now. These are the stories that the rest of the News Talk hosts will be talking about today. Some of them probably will spend some time on just one or two of these stories.
Yep.
We will squeeze in as many as possible. On Friday, I think we broke our record. We did 20 stories in 20 minutes. These are the hottest, freshest news stories that are out there right now that affect you on a national level, on a political level, and we serve them bite-sized. So short little summaries of the news, and I will begin with this one from the Washington Times. A pair of Senate Republican defense hawks said yesterday that the United States, quote, has sat on the sidelines for too long, unquote, as the Syrian conflict rages and produces increasingly conclusive evidence of the use of chemical weapons by the Assad regime. Senators John McCain of Arizona and Lindsey Graham of South Carolina said it has become clear that Syrian President Bashar Assad is using toxic weapons against civilians. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it does look like it to me, too. I mean, you heard some of the sound bites, I'm sure, on the news.
Oh, yeah.
From the witnesses, and the quote is, quote, and it is the responsibility of civilized nations everywhere to ensure that those responsible are held accountable, unquote. Yes, I definitely agree. When you start hearing stories of thousands of people just dropping dead because of chemical weapons, when you hear stories of these nations ordering more gas masks than has ever been ordered before, you know that something is up, and it's not good. So the rest, I agree, the civilized nations of the world, civilized people of the world, need to stand up and say something before we have another Nazi Germany on our hands.
That's right, exactly. And in classrooms across the country, teachers are going back to school to learn how to spot symptoms of mental illness among their students to try to prevent school violence. This is all part of an effort to prevent incidents such as this week's shooting at an elementary school in Georgia. That shooting could have ended in disaster if it were not for the quick thinking of school bookkeeper Antoinette Tuff. Suspect 20-year-old Michael Brandon Hill told Tuff that he was mentally unstable and had nothing to live for, but Antoinette calmed him down and convinced him to surrender. Mental illness also played a role in the December shooting deaths at Sandy Hook Elementary School in Newton, Connecticut, and the massacre at Columbine High School in Colorado 14 years ago. So this is really, really prevalent. The teachers are really on guard now for things because you never know who's going to be the one to go off the deep end, whether it's the quiet student or the one that's very verbal.
And you would think that the teachers probably all throughout history have probably been able to pinpoint the students with the borderline psychological problems.
Oh, certainly.
They probably always have. It's probably not the teachers.
No.
It's probably the superiors of the teachers that need to listen.
Certainly.
I'm guessing that teachers probably all along have always gone to somebody above them and said, Johnny in the third row in the fourth period is going through something. Maybe we should have somebody talk to him. And so I'm guessing that putting it on the teachers is like, hello, they've probably been doing it all along anyway.
Oh, yeah, exactly.
All right, next one is not so controversial. It's about the Farmer's Almanac. The Farmer's Almanac is using words like piercing cold and bitterly cold and biting cold to describe the upcoming winter. And if its predictions are right, the first outdoor Super Bowl in years will be a messy storm bowl. The 197-year-old publication, the Farmer's Almanac, hits the newsstands today, and it predicts a winter storm will hit the Northeast around the time the Super Bowl is played at MetLife Stadium in the Meadowbrooks in New Jersey. It also predicts a colder than normal winter for 2/3 of the country and heavy snowfall in the Midwest, Great Lakes, and New England. And the managing editor of the Farmer's Almanac, Sandy Duncan, not that Sandy Duncan, said, quote, we're using a very strong 4-letter word to describe this winter, which is cold. It's going to be very cold, unquote.
Oh, my gosh. Oh, my gosh. Well, right now, the economy is really, really great in Houston, Texas. Builders and global oil companies from Phillips 66 to Exxon Mobil Corporation are looking past their previous busts of financial building in different cities, and they're now spending billions on gleaming new buildings throughout the state of Texas. The U.S. shale oil and gas revolution, which has already changed industries from railroads to pipelines and refineries, is helping drive the voracious appetite for office space needed for the expanding workforce in the world's energy capital. Demand is so hot that Houston is one of the few places where banks, including Wells Fargo and Company, that particular financial institution is seen as one of the more conservative big banks, they're going to loan money for a new building without demanding developers first have a tenant. So this is great. If you have a huge business and want to build, go to Houston, Texas. You'll have everything there.
All right. You're listening to the 20-minute segment we have each morning at this time called News Bites. We take the news, we break it down into a very summarized version of that news, and we bring it to you. This is fresh off the press, hot news, usually political, although not always, or at least somehow going to affect you in some way. Definitely will be on the other talk shows in the course of the day. We do it bite-sized so that we can squeeze as many in as possible. Here's another one. In a roundtable discussion on This Week, ABC News' Cokie Roberts reflected on the progress in our country 50 years after the March on Washington and Martin Luther King Jr.'s I Have a Dream speech. Growing up in the Deep South in the era of Jim Crow, the difference is dramatic. It's a great testament to the fact that when you do something like pass a voting rights bill, that makes a difference, he said. Still, Roberts expressed concern over recent legislation on the Voting Rights Act of 1965. In June, the Supreme Court invalidated key parts of this law, which spurred contentious debates on race and equal opportunity. Critics of the ruling call it a regression. Proponents argue that the Voting Rights Act of 1965 is outdated. Roberts said, quote, "What's going on about voting rights is downright evil because it is something that really needs to keep going forward and not backward." And that's the end of that quote. And just real quickly, I'll slip in. We did discuss that quite a bit when we were debating things during this half hour. And now it's up to you to find a forum someplace where you can debate them, because we're not doing that here anymore. You're next.
And Obamacare is still being in the debate arenas. Senator Ted Cruz this past Sunday doubled down on his call to arms in defunding Obamacare, even if Senate Democrats are highly unlikely to approve any short-term spending this September that impugns President Obama's signature domestic achievement. Mr. Cruz is a Texas Republican. He said that if the GOP-controlled House could pass a continuing resolution that strips the Affordable Care Act of funding this September, a grassroots tsunami of opposition to the health care law could force the Senate to relent. So there are pros and cons on both sides of Obamacare, and I think the only reason this is such a heated debate is because it is mandated. If Obama wouldn't have had it mandated, then people might have welcomed it with more open arms and accepted it more.
A little 2 cents from Robin.
My opinion.
Next story, it's time to stand up and fight to save America. And it is a woman with a familiar surname in U.S. politics that is asking for a chance to lead a renewed assault on Washington and rid America of what she sees as the scourge of Barack Obama, impending socialism, and the grasping hand of big government. Who do you think I'm talking about? 46-year-old Liz Cheney, the daughter of former U.S. Vice President Dick Cheney.
Oh, okay.
Doesn't stand much over 5 feet tall in her cowboy boots, but from behind her sunglasses, she radiates the kind of toughness that suits a place where you can still legally take a 6-shooter into a bar. It is very early its very early days in her race for the 2014 Senate, but as Mrs. Cheney takes to the stump to address a meeting of the Bighorn Basin branch of the Tea Party, she is breathing conservative fire and warning that America is facing a moment of decision. And I wonder why she still has her last name. I guess she chose to keep it. She's Mrs. Cheney, but she's the daughter of Dick Cheney.
Yeah, and they can do that. Well, the brain learning addiction is still in the news, and we're talking about cocaine. Taking cocaine can change the structure of the brain within hours in what could be the first steps of drug addiction. This is according to U.S. researchers. Animal tests reported in the journal Nature Neuroscience showed that new structures linked to learning and memory began to grow soon after the drug was taken. Mice with the most brain changes showed a greater preference for cocaine, and the team at the University of California, Berkeley, and the University of San Francisco looked for tiny protrusions from brain cells called dendritic spines. They are heavily implicated in memory formation. So, who knows? Maybe people that have Alzheimer's or dementia, maybe, they're people that are taking care of them might, just say, okay, we're going to go there and have them take cocaine and see if they can get their memory back.
Well,
can you imagine that? Even though it's
another 2 cents from you.
Addicted, maybe that might happen.
If you're looking for a segment on your favorite news talk station where there's lots of news and just a smattering of talk, it looks like, this is the segment right here. It's called News Bites, and we're bringing you as many news stories as we can in the 20 minutes that we have each morning. The next one is regarding a report from the Postal Service that there's an increase in gas mask inquiries among the Assad regime. As talk of a possible U.S.-led attack on the Assad regime picked up over the weekend, the Israel Postal Authority, there you go, that's the one, said that on Sunday there was a 4-fold increase in the number of Israelis calling to inquire about picking up gas masks over a typical weekday. Maya Avishai, the Israel Postal Company spokesperson, added that the number of Israelis who contacted the Postal Service's call center yesterday to order the gas masks delivered to their house was 3 times that of a normal weekday.
Wow.
Avishai said that while the Postal Service will only have the official numbers by this morning, I guess their time, in speaking with employees of distribution centers around the country, they have reported a significant increase in pickups on yesterday. And that is from the Jerusalem Post, by the way.
Oh, gosh. Well, there is a project that is examining the local health impacts from natural gas drilling from natural gas drilling. It challenges the industry position that no one suffers, but also suggests the problems may not be as widespread as some critics claim. The Southwest Pennsylvania Environmental Health Project is one of the first long-term attempts to monitor drilling-related health impacts. Over the last 18 months, the project found 27 cases in Washington County plausibly linked to gas drilling activities, 7 cases of skin rashes, 4 cases of eye irritation, and 13 of breathing problems. There were 3 of headaches and dizziness. A spokesman for the energy industry group Marcellus Shale Coalition says that, in general, air quality across the nation is improving thanks to expanded natural gas use.
Again, you're listening to News Bites. This is hot, fresh news served bite-sized. The next story is out of Illinois. Gun owners in Illinois will be required to report missing firearms under a new law signed by Governor Pat Quinn. According to the Chicago Tribune, Quinn said the law will make it easier to recover stolen weapons and help ensure that only responsible people buy firearms. The legislation includes a mandatory background check by gun owners of potential buyers of firearms. The measure passed both chambers of the Illinois General Assembly. It's going to help our law enforcement, was a quote from Governor Quinn, who is, by the way, a Democrat.
Wow. Well, Federal Reserve officials rebuffed international calls to take the threat of fallout in emerging markets into account when tapering the U.S. monetary stimulus. The risk that the Fed's trimming of bond buying will hurt economies from India to Turkey by sparking an exodus of cash and higher borrowing costs was a dominant theme at the annual meeting of central bankers and economists in Jackson Hole, Wyoming. That ended on August the 24th. An index of emerging market stocks last week fell 2.7%, the steepest in 2 months, compared with a 0.5% gain in the Standard & Poor's 500 index.
And the next story, the Air Force has removed the commander of a nuclear weapons unit at a Montana base following a failed safety and security inspection. Military leaders say the decision to relieve Colonel David Lynch of command at Malmstrom Air Force Base stems from a loss of confidence. They say it's not the result of the failed inspection first reported by the Associated Press on August 13th. This is the second time in recent months that an Air Force nuclear commander was replaced following a high-profile security misstep. Lieutenant Colonel Randy Olson was relieved of duty at Minot Air Force Base, North Dakota, in June.
Oh, wow. And Oklahoma's Republican governor said Sunday that it would be fitting for President Barack Obama to speak out on the murder of Christopher Lane. Christopher was the Australian college student who was gunned down in a murder that police say was motivated only by boredom by the gentleman that shot him. I think it would be a nice gesture for him to do that, particularly since the country of Australia has expressed their sentiments as to the murder itself, Governor Mary Fallon said on Fox News Sunday. She added that she herself was planning to telephone Lane's parents when time differences between the United States and Australia allowed. Lane was a 23-year-old baseball player who was studying in the United States. He was shot last week while out jogging in Duncan, Oklahoma. 3 teens were subsequently charged in his death, and police said the only apparent motive for the young men was having nothing else to do. I know.
That's
this is
I'm not so sure that I agree with pressuring the president to say something on that, but the president has said stuff about what you would consider local cases anyway.
Right,
so.
Exactly. He stepped out about local.
The next story is, again, about the chemical weapons threats that you're hearing about. And if you read that story about the thousands of people that died from the chemical attack, or at least allegedly did, it looked like it to me. This is just scary stuff. Syria's use of chemical weapons against its own people simply demonstrates what will happen if Iran gets even deadlier weapons. That's a statement from Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. He said that yesterday before a meeting of French Foreign Minister Laurent Fabius. What we see in Syria is how extremist regimes have no reservations whatsoever about using these weapons, even when they use it against innocent civilians, against their own people, he said.
Holy cow.
In the end, I'm sorry?
No, I was just commenting.
In the end, the extremists use these weapons, so we must prevent them from having these weapons, unquote. Following his meeting with Netanyahu, Fabius held a press conference in which he said there was no doubt that Assad regime used chemical weapons in an attack last week in a Damascus suburb. And again, it didn't look like it was a mystery to me.
Gosh.
So I'm hoping that all of us talking about it will get somebody moving about it. It's just such a disturbing. Anytime you use a weapon of mass destruction, whether it explodes or poisons people, clearly is something we shouldn't be doing anymore in this world.
Well, the United States National Security Agency has bugged the United Nations New York headquarters. Germany's Der Spiegel Weekly said on Sunday in a report on U.S. spying that could further strain relations between Washington and its allies. Citing secret U.S. documents obtained by fugitive former intelligence contractor Edward Snowden, Der Spiegel said the files showed how the United States systematically spied on other states and institutions. Der Spiegel said the European Union and the UN's Vienna-based nuclear watchdog, the International Atomic Energy Agency, were among those targeted by United States intelligence agents. In the summer of 2012, the International Atomic Energy and the NSA, the National Security Agency experts, succeeded in getting into the UN video conferencing system, cracked its code system, according to one of the documents cited by Der Spiegel.
And somewhat related, the U.S. government's efforts to determine which highly classified materials that Eric Snowden leaked and took from the National Security Agency have been frustrated by Snowden's sophisticated efforts to cover his digital trail by deleting or bypassing electronic logs. That, according to officials from the government in an interview with reporters from the Associated Press, such logs would have showed what information Snowden viewed or downloaded. The government's forensic investigation is wrestling with Snowden's apparent ability to defeat safeguards established to monitor and deter people looking at information without proper permission. The officials who spoke on condition of anonymity because they were not authorized to discuss the sensitive developments publicly. And if one guy can do it, guess what? Other guys can do it.
Oh, certainly. And last week, Brazil became the latest country to take emergency action to shore up its currency as anxious investors piled out of emerging markets. India, Indonesia, Turkey, there was more than a whiff of panic in the air as policymakers tried to reassure financial markets that they remain a good bet. The Brazilian real has lost 20% of its value against the dollar since the start of the year. The rupiah is down 15%, and the Turkish lira is down 10%. The situation has alarming echoes of the catastrophic Asian financial crisis of 1997 to 1998. Back then, Thailand became the first of the fast-growing Asian tigers forced to turn to the International Monetary Fund as foreign investors lost heart and left, and its currency plunged. And that sparked a chain reaction that spread across much of the continent.
Once again, you're listening to News Bites. These are short, summarized stories of the news that are making national and international headlines this morning. We bring them to you bite-sized, hot, fresh, and bite-sized. They're served, we kind of compared to food right there. Former U.S. Secretary of State Colin Powell said the situation in Syria was beyond the capability of the United States to influence to any major extent. Appearing on CBS's Face the Nation yesterday, Powell said the two sides of the conflict were too shaky for the United States to effectively take sides. He said, quote, "In both Egypt and Syria, America has to take a much more clever role," unquote. That was a statement that Mr. Powell made. He added that he considers the Syrian conflict to be a civil war. With one more quote, we should not go around thinking that we can really make things happen, unquote. That was a story we got from the UPI news agency.
And election 2016 is now on everyone's mind. Ever since President Obama and Hillary Clinton appeared together for a joint network interview in January, it seemed as if the president had unofficially made the former Secretary of State his heir apparent. But on Friday, Obama stood by Vice President Joe Biden in Biden's hometown of Scranton, Pennsylvania. Obama heaped praise on the man who has dutifully been at his side since he picked him as his running mate exactly 5 years ago. Obama is quoted as saying, "If it weren't for Scranton, I wouldn't have Joe Biden." He said that at Lackawanna College. "It was the best decision that I ever made politically because I love this guy. And he's got heart, and he cares about people, and he's willing to fight for what he believes in, and he's got some Scranton in him," said the president.
All right, you've been listening to News Bites. 21 stories squeezed in just now, Robin, in about 21 minutes. About a minute, a story per minute.
That's awesome.
These are the biggest stories, the freshest stories, the hottest stories. They're affecting you, me, and the entire world. And the rest of the news talk industry will be talking about them all day long. Please take a story, do something with it, debate it in your little groups. Make a difference. These are the stories you should be talking about. We bring them to you bite-sized so we can squeeze as many in as possible. We'll take a little break and we will be right back. Thank you, Robin.
Thank you, Larry.
Ocala's information station, 1370 WOCA. Ocala.
ABC News Now. I'm Karen Chase. The wildfire scorching the earth near Yosemite National Park in California has grown to the size of the city of Chicago, and while it's slowing down, it's still being spread by windy weather. U.S. officials are hinting they may be forced to take action in Syria. A UN spokesman says agency inspectors were fired on as they headed into Damascus to investigate reports of chemical weapons attacks. The elementary school bookkeeper, credited with talking a gunman into surrendering before anybody got hurt, was honored at her church in Decatur, Georgia. A local congressman issued a proclamation declaring it Antoinette Tough Day. She says she's not a hero and that God used her to save lives. Some of the biggest stars in tennis have gathered in New York where the U.S. Open begins today. Maria Sharapova is sidelined with an injury. Fans say the long-awaited NSYNC reunion performance at last night's MTV Music Video Awards simply wasn't long enough. It was the last 30 seconds of Justin Timberlake's medley of hits. He got the Michael Jackson Video Vanguard Award. Bruno Mars and Taylor Swift won Best Male and Female Videos. This is ABC News.
My company designed that sound for a horror film. But I like to play it when I did accounting, invoicing, or scary admin stuff. But now, using Sage 1, I played this sound.
Sage One is the simple online app that makes accounting easy, so you can get back to what you love faster. Go from to time is money. Be stingy with it. Visit BeStingy.com now for a free month of Sage.
Never play poker with a guy named Lucky. Never hit a piñata that has hornets coming out of it. Never wear a fanny pack. No, really, don't ever wear a fanny pack. And never trust a car that hasn't been trusted to Midas. Save on brakes, tires, maintenance, and total car care. For a car you can depend on long after the warranty expires. You deserve the Midas touch. Get a comprehensive oil change, free visual brake check, and tire rotation for $19.99. Up to 5 quarts conventional oil, up to 10% shop fee were permitted based on pre-invoiced retail price not to exceed $35. Most vehicles at participating Midas.
Hi, this is Brad. I want to take a moment to talk about a serious issue. In the next 5 years, the aviation industry is projected to have a shortage of commercial pilots. Now is the time to start training. Ocala Flying Club has started a scholarship for the youth of Marion County ages 17 to 24. The club will donate up to $4,000 towards a pilot's license. This will help get the student on their way to obtaining their commercial pilot license. If this sounds like something you would be interested in, or if you know someone that would be, please contact Ocala Aviation Services, 861-7484.
The weather is brought to you by myfwc.com. Life jackets save lives. We're at Florida. Partly sunny today with a shower and thunderstorm around, especially in the afternoon, high 86 to 90. Overnight tonight, partly cloudy skies with a shower or thunderstorm near the coast, lows 71 to 75. For tomorrow, times of clouds and sun with a shower or thunderstorm around in the afternoon, high 87 to 91. Wednesday, times of clouds and sun with a shower or thunderstorm in parts of the area, high 88 to 92. From the Florida Weather Center, I'm Joe Lundberg.
Legally Yours, brought to you by Fuller & Fuller Attorneys at Law. On the air every Wednesday morning at 10:30 a.m. with John Fuller, a board-certified civil trial lawyer for over 25 years. John welcomes your questions, from business to complex family matters to legal disputes. So tune in every Wednesday morning at 10:30 a.m.